All right, we have some breaking news here. Bernie Sanders has just dropped out of the race for the Democratic presidential nominee, and in so doing, he has all but guaranteed that November 2020 will be a repeat of the shockwaves sent around the world in November 2016. Stick with me to find out why. You're going to absolutely love it. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Steve here with you. I certainly hope you're all having a safe and sound and lovely lockdown Wednesday. If this is your first time here at this channel, we post 2 videos a day analyzing current events, analyze some super awesome conservative trends so you can live in the present in light of even better things to come. So if you haven't already done so, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. It'd be an absolute privilege to have you as a regular part of this channel where you're just going to love interacting with this online community of conservatives from all over the world. And speaking of fellow conservatives, we got a very important message for all of you business owners that are out there. As you know, we look out for each other in this channel. And so if you own a business or if you know someone who owns a small business and is feeling the effects of this pandemic crunch, we have a great friend and supporter of this channel who's here to help you. Our good friend Brant Frost and his awesome team over at First Liberty are here to help get you one of the new emergency SBA payroll protection program loans so that you can keep your business going and your employees working. And I mean, they're so awesome. They're one of us. And they're here to serve and help you during these trying times. So make sure to click on the link below and go to firstlibertyga.com. That's firstlibertyga.com. And as little as 24 hours, they can get you approved for a loan. Again, that's firstlibertyga.com. Make sure to tell them that Dr. Steve sent you to take good care of you. You'd be glad you did. All right, here, let's dive right in. The nearly 80-year-old Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders has just announced that he is indeed suspending his campaign and quitting the race for Democratic presidential nominee. This is, of course, all but guarantees that former Vice President, the Walter Mondale of 2020, Joe Biden, will be the Democratic Party's nominee. Sanders just announced this decision, which seems to have been inordinately influenced by the default suspension of his campaign by virtue of the coronavirus, as well as having been crushed in the latest primary states where Biden's been winning with an overwhelming advantage there. So it's now officially over for Bernie. He will never, ever be the first socialist president of the United States. Now, this, of course, is his second go-around. He was denied the nomination back in 2016 when it became apparent that the primary process was rigged against him. Those were the accusations of Democrats. Keep in mind, if you recall, Donna Brazile was the Democratic National Committee chairwoman at the time. And she said that Hillary Clinton had flatly rigged the primary process against Sanders. Hillary Clinton basically controlled the Democratic National Committee's money, okay? And this was largely because the DNC went into deep debt after Obama's 2012 campaign, so they had to rely on Hillary's donors to bail them out, and they basically got to rewrite the rules of the primary process completely in Hillary's favor. But nevertheless, as it turns out, 2020 didn't fare much better for Sanders either. Now, Bernie had, I think, a tougher time this go around. I know there was a very, very small window, a short period of time when everyone thought, wow, Bernie is going to pull this off. He's going to be the nominee. But looking back, that was very short-lived. He had a hard time garnering the kind of enthusiasm that surrounded his bid back in 2016. The problem for Sanders in 2020 was obviously he was not the only socialist in town anymore. All the Democratic nominees began talking like Sanders was talking back in 2016. So he simply no longer commanded the far left niche in the way he did when he was going up against Clinton. Remember, back in 2016, as it's been pointed out quite frequently, 2016 was the year of civil war within both parties. Both the Republicans and the Democrats faced the most significant populist challenges from the rank and file that they had seen in decades. So Republicans had successfully repelled the Buchanan challenge back in 92 and 96, a challenge by Pat Buchanan to realign the Republican Party around a renewed nationalist, populist, and traditionalist platform, an America First platform, of course, very much akin to President Trump's. But he, of course, he was unsuccessful and eventually ran on a third party ticket, the Reform Party, if I recall, back in 2000. But in 2016, then candidate Donald Trump brought the Buchanan paradigm of border security, economic nationalism, and pro-life traditionalism back into the primaries, and boy, were the rank and file hungry for it. If you recall, in the Pennsylvania GOP primaries, there were a record number of Democrats who switched parties just to vote for Trump. And as it turned out, on election night, these were blue-collar, manufacturing, Rust Belt workers who saw that they finally had a champion in Trump who's going to rescue their jobs and even return them from this global division of labor that ships manufacturing jobs overseas while accumulating capital and wealth in urban areas in the big cities. Again, one of the most startling examples of incessant blindness was how the Rockefeller Republicans and the neocons simply couldn't see how their so-called free trade policies were killing our rural areas. I mean, they actually expected blue-collar voters to vote for them, even though every time they opened their mouths, all blue-collar workers could hear was, I'm going to make sure that your jobs are shipped off to Mexico. Vote for me. I mean, yeah, right. Gee, so with Trump, they finally had a champion, a populist champion, and he's made more than good on his promises to them. So the Republican Party had its civil war between the center-right establishment neocons, the Rockefeller Republicans, the Mitt Romneys, the Paul Ryans on the one side, and the rank-and-file nationalist populists, the actual Republican voters. And of course, with the election of Donald Trump, the rank-and-file nationalist populists have won. And they won huge, right? Huge. Now, however, things didn't work so well for the Democrats. Bernie Sanders represented the socialist populist rank-and-file, while Hillary Clinton represented the establishment center-left Rockefeller Democrat, the neoliberal Tony Blair wing of the Democratic Party. And they actually rigged the primaries so as to guarantee her win. And of course, the establishment media, the corporatist globalist media, was completely behind her, helping her across the finish line with the primaries. But alas, they failed to get her elected in the general election. But that was Bernie's appeal back in 2016, the Civil War context. He was the representative of the populist revolt against the establishment in the Democratic Party. Now, this year for 2020, virtually every single Democratic candidate ended up positioning themselves as representative for the populist revolt, right? Whether you're talking about Warren or Buttigieg or Tulsi Gabbard, nobody wanted anything to do with Hillary Clinton. Did you notice that? And that, in effect, took up Sanders' populist banner, the populist left banner. So that, I think, was the real challenge for Bernie and how he never successfully weathered it. So Bernie's out. And now the question is, who are the Democrats left with? With that context in mind, we have some bad news and we have some really bad news. The bad news is that Joe Biden is now the presidential nominee. The really bad news is that Joe Biden is now the presidential nominee. I mean, the reason why this is bad news and really bad news, if you're a Democrat, of course, is that by putting in the establishment candidate as the nominee, the center-left Rockefeller establishment candidate, the Democrats have basically guaranteed that 2020 is going to be 2016 all over again. Remember, in 2016, 12% of Bernie supporters voted for Trump over Hillary Clinton. But according to a new ABC News Washington Post poll, that number is actually up. A full 15% of Bernie Sanders supporters said that they do indeed plan on casting their vote for President Trump in November. Now, that includes Joe Rogan, by the way, who said he'd vote for Trump over Biden. He was a Sanders supporter. And given the civil wars back in 2016, it really shouldn't surprise us in the least that 15% of Bernie supporters, right, the real populists among them, are going to be supporting the populist candidate, which is emphatically not Joe Biden. Again, the Democrats made this mistake back in 2016. They ran a so-called consensus candidate like the Republicans did with Mitt Romney in 2012, McCain in 2008. But those days are over. Those consensus politics are over. They don't make sense anymore. I think this is one of the major reasons why Biden is just doing so poorly and will continue to do so. He represents a politics that's no longer relevant to an increasing portion of the population. And so needless to say, with 15% of Bernie supporters behind Trump, and with a considerably higher percentage of blacks behind Trump, as we talked about before, far more than any other Republican candidate in recent history, with over 30% of Latinos behind Trump, and with a Republican Party rank and file solidly behind him with over 90% approval. Trump is building a coalition that's going to make November of 2020 look like November of 2016 all over again. Now, before you go, you definitely want to check out my latest video on the media's total fail. The left-wing activists, disguised as journalists, cannot believe that the American people are actually rallying around President Trump during this coronavirus crisis. It's going to absolutely make your day. So make sure to click on the link, and I will see you over there. God bless.